Super. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another webinar at CWS. Really happy to see so many people here and more people joining in. Just as we're beginning, just a brief introduction. At CWS, we basically work in many arenas of wildlife conservation and more recently even public health and environmental education. And the webinar series is one of the ways in which we're trying to do more exciting outreach programs, and it's a way for us to. Oh, I'm sorry, there's some issue. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I hope this is better. Yes, so this is a way for us to engage with a lot of audiences even through the pandemic, and it's something that began in 2020 as a replacement for some of the public talks we used to have. And so really excited to have you all here. So today we are going to be talking with Dr. Ashwin Viswanathan, who is a fantastic birder and is one of the most fun people to go birding with as well. He is a research associate at the Nature Conservation Foundation and currently works pretty extensively in using citizen science data collected from eBird to assess the state of Indian birds, looking at patterns of migration and many other very interesting analytical studies. He is also part of the outreach and environmental education public involvement program at NCF, and he's one of the best people to walk us through what citizen science is, how to engage well with birding, and just how to use some of these apps that we will be exploring today. So welcome, Ashwin. It's really nice to have you here. I'm really glad we were able to do this. Yeah, Ashwin, I think you should be able to unmute now.
Yes. Hi, Ishika, and thank you for inviting me to talk here.
Thanks so much for being here. It's really fun, and I've been wanting to do an interactive webinar for a long time, so it's really great that we're getting to do this now. So before, just to get the audience on the same page as us, today we'll be just briefly exploring a little more about what citizen science is, what it's like to go birding, and the various steps you can take if you're interested in learning how to bird actively or engaging with data collection for citizen science platforms. And once we've done that a little bit, Ashwin will be sharing his screen with us and walking us through just the eBird website, and we'll talk a little bit more about the apps towards the end as well. So after a little bit of conversation, we'll open it up, and if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box, and the second half of today's webinar is going to be interactive, so we'll take your questions as they come. So Ashwin, let's start off, just simply, you've been a birder for a long time now, and I know that you have also built experience and expertise when it comes to things like species identification, bird behavior, migration patterns of birds, and just generally, you know a lot about the avian biodiversity of India. So I think what I wanted to ask you was how much of this has actually been academic learning, how much of it has been practical learning from just going out and birding. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's a combination of the two.
Mm-hmm.
I think the first decade and a half of my bird watching, so I've been birding since I was 6 or 7 years old. And I don't think I looked at anything academic or sought any academic means of learning until I was much older, of course. But field guides play a very useful role. And there's actually a lot of information you can get about bird behavior, about where they might be found, what they look like. A number of these just from our field guides, which don't look like they contain too much information, but they actually contain some amazing information. But through this entire period, a lot of the learning is practical. Spend time out in the field, watch birds, see what they're doing, see where some birds are there and see where they are not present. And all of these observations raise many questions in your mind, which you can then seek academic means of learning for. You wonder where these birds are at some point of time and why they aren't there. Then you can go back, and now with so much information easily available, everything's just a Google search away.
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting. Since you started so young, I think the resources we have are definitely extremely different. So that actually brings me to maybe one of the most important questions that everyone has, which is how would you define a birder? How is it different from someone the act of bird watching? What is it to be birding per se?
So everyone who's watching birds or enjoys watching birds is a birder. And I
Yeah.
think that's the purest definition there is. And I think that is the general community is so large because in general, anybody who enjoys watching birds can talk to anybody else who enjoys watching birds, and anybody who enjoys photographing birds. And
Mhm.
sometimes you see a distinction, but at the end of the day, it's just a community of people who enjoy watching and spending time with birds. So really, anybody who likes watching birds is a birder.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think it's so nice to have that broader definition because I think it comes along with a lot of imposter syndrome where a lot of people wonder whether they're actually a birder. So, and what the difference between being a birder and watching birds is. And I think a lot of people tend to consider themselves amateurs or feel unfit to call themselves birders. So, maybe do you have any ideas or tips on how does one go from being this so-called amateur birder that they think they are to somebody who knows more and who would want to engage more with birds?
I think it's just a matter of resources and time
Mm-hmm.
because that interest is there. And now there are so many ways to allow that interest to grow. There are birding walks that you can go on. I think every metro city has some amazing individuals taking people on regular birding walks on weekends, and that's a really good way to be exposed to a wide variety of experiences. People who have been watching birds for 20 years to people who have just begun watching birds, and everybody comes with their own questions and perspectives. And sometimes the questions that come when you begin birding are actually really insightful and things that you may not think of if you've been watching birds for many years. Now, aside from these birding walks, there are so many resources. There are resources like Merlin now, which were never available in the past, and we'll come to this later in our discussion. But wonderful online resources which are free, and you can just learn so much about any bird with just a click or two. You don't need to spend money on books. You don't need to spend money on various resources that were so difficult to get in the past. Everything's just a click away on your phone. So all of these really speed up the process. And I think another really important resource that we have now are social media channels.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's Facebook or WhatsApp, there are regional groups, WhatsApp groups for various cities and states. And you can find out from any birdwatchers that any of you know about whether such a regional group exists. And a lot of information is shared on this group, not just about rare birds and sightings, but discussions about more academic aspects of birds.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these, I think, together help in this learning. You may have experienced some of the groups on Facebook or Instagram. And I don't know if there's a groups on Instagram. I'm not on Instagram, but on Facebook, there are some wonderful groups where you can seek people's thoughts and experiences and knowledge.
That's amazing. And I think I also know that you're part of many WhatsApp groups where people are constantly asking you for help on identifying a certain bird that they've seen or trying to understand the behavior that they've observed. How does one find groups like this on WhatsApp and things like that? What are these groups like, and how do they end up getting formed?
So these groups, the way they were started, or the philosophy with which they were started, was as bird monitoring groups,
Mm-hmm.
where a group of people who want to monitor birds around them in their neighborhoods, in their states, and have some interest in the welfare of these birds. I don't mean the welfare of individual birds, but the welfare of birds as a whole in their area, with monitoring being a key to understanding how these birds are doing. So these groups were begun with this philosophy. There are bird monitoring groups for various states,
Okay.
and there's no easy way to find out what these groups are. It generally, people ask each other, is there a group that we can be a part of, and then you end up being added on this group. There's
Mm-hmm.
also participation in citizen science initiatives that exposes people to many people who are maybe part of these groups. But
Right.
certainly a more open structure like Facebook, asking people there can get you closer to some of these WhatsApp groups,
I see.
perhaps. But yeah, these
Okay.
WhatsApp groups are intended to better monitor birds.
Interesting. That actually very nicely brings us to citizen science and how just globally, and it's amazing how much India has taken to the whole contribution of bird checklists to citizen science using eBird. And perhaps you can also tell us exactly where India stands in all of that. But I understand we are pretty high up in ranking in terms of the countries that contribute to eBird data. And so, could you tell us a little bit about eBird as a citizen science platform, and why do you think it's taken off the way it has, and what's the secret there?
So, citizen science initiatives in India are not new in that, let's say, I think the first one was the Asian waterbird census for birds in particular. And this began in the 1980s, late 1980s, 1987, I think.
Mhm.
And when that idea was brought into India, it immediately had some people immediately took to it, simply because everyone was looking for their hobby to mean something more. And I think that as bird watchers, there's that innate need for us to do something more with our hobbies. And when people learned in 1987 that all of this information, they're going to wetlands, counting all the birds that there are in wetlands, that can feed into some larger database, which can then inform decisions at a global level. It was something really exciting, and something that people took to. And post that, we didn't, although many other countries had these citizen science portals that came up, eBird being one of many. In UK, it's something called Bird Track. In other parts of Europe, there's something called Ornitho and Observation. So there are many of these online platforms that sprung up with the advent of internet later. But India, we didn't have any till I think the first one effectively was Migrant Watch,
Okay.
which started in 2006 or 7. And many birders like me, we immediately took to it because suddenly again there was something we could contribute to. And it was a really exciting thought. And I was based in Rajasthan at that point. And whenever the rosy starlings migrated down, passed through in late July, early August, it was quite nice to put it in this, to upload that observation. And make something more of it. And I was the only person based in Rajasthan who was doing that, so it added a nice element to the national knowledge that was being generated through this platform. Sometime in, I think, 2013, India first participated in GBBC, this Great Backyard Bird Count, which was again a global initiative. And there was considerable participation from India once the idea was put out. uh, in 2013, the participation was not through eBird. GBBC has had its own portal, so you could contribute through that portal. And again, there were a lot of takers simply because people are looking for something like this, in my opinion. And in 2014 was when eBird first came to India. And eBird was a global platform. People were using it all across the world, mostly in US at that point. But now usage has grown all over the world, remote corners of the world. And in 2014, people started using it. And since then, it's, of course, grown tremendously. And this is for two reasons. One reason I already discussed, that there's so many bird watchers looking for some platform to put their observations, but it also ended up serving as a really great place to view your own birding journey. And I think that's another really attractive thing about a platform like eBird, where you can look at how many species you've seen, where you've gone birding in the country, or where you've gone birding in your state, locality, where you've gone during, say, every day of the week, of the month, of the year. And I try to make a checklist every day. And so now it's been 4 or 5 years when I've made a checklist every day. So it lets me know where I've been throughout this long period and what birds I've seen during any day of the last many years. So it serves
Wow.
as a combination of the two, and also a place for us to upload our photographs and
Mm.
audio recordings. Don't have to keep it in our hard drives. We all take so many photos, but it's a place again for the photos to be of more use and for us to get rid of them in some way. You know, I don't want to have my hard drives and computer clogged with photographs. I'd rather put them somewhere and let somebody else deal with them eventually. Yeah.
Yeah, no, this is such an interesting aspect of it. And I think it's a combination of like contributing to a larger goal and also something very personal. So that's really nice. Maybe we can, jump right in at this point. And if you could share your screen and walk us through the eBird website for starters, and maybe we can show everybody exactly how to upload checklists and how to track our personal records and that sort of thing, and we can take questions as they come as we are exploring each part of it.
Yes, I'll just do that.
Great.
So ignore the specifics, but this is the eBird website. And before I speak about this, before I get into more detail here, want to let you all know that if you're a birder, you don't have to be a part of, you don't have to contribute to a platform like this, because there are certain uh, eBird works in the form of checklists, and not every birder makes checklists at any point of time. So if you are a bird watcher who likes taking photos, who just wants to archive those photos, maybe a platform like iNaturalist would be more suited, because it's a photo based system. eBird also uses photos, in that you can upload photos with a checklist, but again, it depends upon what you're really interested in. If it's just about certain photos once in a while, then maybe iNaturalist is a better platform. If you're keeping checklists, eBird is the platform to use. Now, about eBird, when I spoke about eBird beginning in 2014, a number of bird watchers actually had all these notebooks filled with bird checklists back from the 1960s, 70s, depending upon how many years they've been watching birds. And actually, bird watchers, not me, unfortunately, I did not keep such meticulous notes, but bird watchers in general are very meticulous. They've maintained notebooks, and they mentioned that, okay, on this day, from this time to this time in 1985, they saw these bird species and these numbers, and they had these notebooks and notebooks and notebooks of information. And what they've done now is, many of these bird watchers, they've uploaded this information retrospectively now onto eBird. I've also done a little bit of it. I didn't keep much information, but many birders have done that. And because of that, the value of looking at long-term trends, of looking at what has happened from the 1980s, 90s, and 2000s, and what has changed till today, the database now has that possibility. And this you might have heard of the State of India's Birds report. Over there, a number of organizations came together, looked at this information, and they analyzed long-term trends. And this was only possible because of some amazing bird watchers who went back and uploaded their notes. So let me show you what you can learn from the platform itself. Even if you're not an active eBirder, I suggest you use the platform, because there's so much you can learn about birds here. So you see that there are multiple tabs. There's Submit, Explore, My eBird, Science, and a few others. Submit is something that most people do through the app now, which is something we can get to later. For now, I suggest you can ignore the submit option here. You also see it says eBird India. So eBird India is an India-specific portal for eBird. So many countries have their own portals so that you can have certain articles. You see here what's on in January. So this is specific for India. What's on in December, etc. Certain India-specific articles, even the statistics you see here are India-specific. How many birds have been reported in India till today? This is the number. How many complete checklists? And you see that it's a huge number. 1.5 million complete checklists now in India. And a complete checklist is a list of birds where you've reported everything that you detected. It's not that you go and see a rare species and you only put a rare species there. Right? And you put everything. So including the crows and miners and pigeons, and let's say some rare species like an Amur falcon. You never see a rare species without seeing other birds also. So, it's the complete set. And that is a complete checklist. And there are 28,000 e-birders today in India, of which maybe about 20,000 are active, which allows this database now to be so vast and valuable because there are so many people from different corners of the country all contributing knowledge. What you see below this are all the regions and how many birds have been seen this month in all of these regions. And you can see West Bengal, we are barely halfway through January and there are 508 bird species that have been reported in West Bengal already. Karnataka, where I am based, is a little further behind. Not so much more Karnataka can rise here, but West Bengal, incredibly, there are over 900 species that have been reported in West Bengal overall. And here you see checklist leaders. Checklists are what we spoke about earlier, lists of birds. And Tamil Nadu has had the most checklists uploaded this month. And what you see below this are the top photos. What do we mean by top photos? Top photos, so every photo uploaded to eBird. I'll show you what a checklist looks like, but every photo can be rated by the community. And this is just rated for us to be able to look at the best photos. It's not a competition, but it's a way to allow this resource to become most valuable. So if I want to look at photos, let's say for any article that I want to write or a presentation that I need to give, not just me, any of you can look at the top photos uploaded of a particular species so that you get the best quality images to be able to use in your presentations or any sort of output. So you see these are the top photos, top audio, and here you have a rarity feed. And this is something that's quite attractive to many birders. You see in the country, based on filters that are set. In some areas, certain species are set as rare. So in Bangalore, for example, a blue-throated flycatcher would not be rare. But in this part of Kerala, in Kottayam, a blue-throated flycatcher is rare. So here you see these photos of rare birds for that region that have been uploaded. So for Bangalore, for example, a turtle dove is rare. So you see this rarity feed, and it's always nice to see. Somebody has been seeing a falcated duck in some part of West Bengal. Great. Now, if I want to go and see a falcated duck, I can go to that part of West Bengal. Or I can just vicariously enjoy this rarity. So here you have falcated ducks, and as you go on, lots of photos of this duck. And let's see when the next bird comes in. Here's a Pallas grasshopper warbler and similar. So now let me show you what a checklist looks like. So I'll click on my checklist and go to my latest checklist. So as you see, I've been making checklists every day. And this is my checklist for the morning. It's usually when I go walking my dog. So here in GKVK, this campus near my house. So you see, there's a map that is only visible to you that gives you the track of where you walked. And this is not visible to anybody else. You then have the location, you have the date, you have the time, and you can, when making the checklist on the app, you can set different protocols. You can say whether it's stationary, whether I'm standing in one place when making the checklist. So that usually balcony birding is usually at one place or just from your door outside your house. Traveling checklist is like this one. You start at a location, you walk a bit, and then you have a start time and an end time. And then you have the number of species. Each of these species, you're putting numbers associated with it. So I saw one peafowl, saw a herd, one peafowl, two pigeons, 8 spotted doves, etc. And I saw these two barn owls that were roosting. And I didn't have a camera, so I just took a photo with my phone, and you can upload it. And it serves as a nice memory for me. When I look at this, I remember that, okay, I saw these barn owls sitting in this bush.
Lovely.
And yeah, and you see, this is the checklist. You can also put breeding codes. For example, purple sunbirds have started singing in the last 2 or 3 weeks in Bangalore. And I can, every time there's an option of putting these various breeding codes. Is it building a nest, or is it singing, or is it carrying nesting material, or various options. So purple sunbirds are singing, and I really find it interesting how purple sunbirds disappear from Bangalore for some period of time, and suddenly they appear again at home and in my vicinity singing away. So I don't know where they go in the meanwhile, but it's nice to pinpoint that time. Okay, so you saw the home page and you saw what a checklist looks like. Now I'll show you what you can explore here. So you can always download all the data that's uploaded to eBird. Everything, all the data uploaded to eBird in the world is accessible to you, is accessible to the public. You can submit a request, and then you'll get a link that allows you to choose what or how much data you want to download, and you can download it. And then using some software like Excel or R, of course, Excel cannot handle the global data, but some other statistical softwares, you can handle the data and you can analyze it. I'll explain how you can download the data later, but you do not need to download the data to learn from this database. There are many inbuilt tools that you can access through the Explore tab that allow you to learn a lot about these birds. So let me do the simplest thing. Let me look at some species. I want to learn more about some species. Let's say something like blue throat. I don't know why I chose blue throat, but the photo is going to look good. So you can go to blue throat. So in Explore, you're taken to the species page. So species page will have a combination of photos. So you can click on these photos of the species and go through them. So it's a bit of a guide to you if you want to see what does a blue throat look like. And you see, this is a juvenile blue throat. This is an immature blue throat. Here you have an adult female. This is an adult male. And you can get this, you can get a nice pictorial journey into the various plumages of this bird. So you see, this is a white spotted blue throat. It's a subspecies that has a white spot. But what we have here is a red spotted blue throat. These are the ones we usually get in India. Red spotted blue throats. And here's a no spotted blue throat. And this is another female blue throat. So here, this is a non-breeding male blue throat. So you get a nice journey into what the plumages can look like. Now you can also look at audio. So you see, listen. So if you want to listen to what a blue throat sounds like, now I won't be able to do that here, but I encourage you to go and click on this, and you can you can listen to the songs of the species, you can listen to the calls of the species, and just imagine how much more enjoyable the journey of a birdwatcher has been made today than it was maybe 20 years back, when we had no access to any resource like this and possibly no access to internet. So all of these things, we had no way to look at what a bird sounded like, for example. You had to actually go and find out and field, and mostly we would get it wrong. So you also have descriptions. So beautiful thrush-like bird that tends to stay hidden, etc. How to identify it, and a short description. Remember that this is no substitute for a field guide. A field guide has information on how to separate it from other similar looking birds. Field guides also have information on the on where you can find this bird, and on, like, you have these plates that allow species to be compared visually together. So you have many species that are on a page, and you can look at what other similar species there are. And that is something that you cannot do in an online resource like this. Okay, so now what else? Now it tells me about my own statistics as well here. How many times have I seen blue throat, seen a herd blue throat? it appears that I've reported a blue throat 32 times. I may have seen a blue throat more times than that, but this is how many times it's featured in my checklist.
Right.
How many of them have I put photos in? So 10 of these checklists have photos. I have never uploaded audio of a blue throat. So I didn't know this. At some point, I'll have to go and record a blue throat. But now I can click on this and look at what these photos are that I've uploaded of a blue throat. And here are some. So this was recently in Assam and so on. So I can go and look at my photos that I've uploaded of a species. So now I'll go back. And you also see eBird totally has 78,000 reports of a blue throat and
Wow.
6,800 of those checklists with photos. So now you see the top photos of blue throat. So if you want to use a photo of a blue throat in a presentation, you want to embed it, you can always look here. I'm going to show somebody what does a blue throat look like. Go to the best photos of the species.
So Ashwin, we have one question which is relevant here, which has come in, which is, are images on eBird copyright free? And what does that involve when you're uploading or using these images?
So that's a really good question. I'm glad you asked. eBird at the moment doesn't have complex licensing. So at the moment, all photos are copyrighted and they all belong to the photographer. So, but there are ways to use these photos without necessarily downloading them. You can use the Macaulay link. You can embed photos, which allows you to actually use these photos while automatically giving credit. What you can also do, if you happen to know the photographer or you see them on some social media channel, you can always approach them for permission. But what I mean by embedding a photograph is that we go to this, you see that all photos are on the Macaulay library. So if you go to the Macaulay library link, you will see the photograph itself and you'll see an option that says embed. Now anybody can embed a photo. And if you have an article you're writing, if you're using, I think many on, if you want to put it in a website, etc., you can always use the embed link and put a photo there, which automatically is going to give you the give the photographer credit. So that's the best way to use it. If not, you can always contact somebody if you want to use it for a non-commercial purpose. Contact somebody who will put you in touch with somebody else. All these networks are very small now. And somebody will probably know this photographer. You might have to go through 2 or 3 networks, and eventually everybody gives permission. And I can tell you, most photographers who upload photos on eBird are just waiting for this licensing to come through, which will allow them to make it Creative Commons. And I'm waiting for that. Sadly, they haven't figured it out yet because it's a little complicated. But on iNaturalist, you'll find that photos can be licensed, and you can look for Creative Commons photos and you'll get fantastic photos on iNaturalist as well to use.
Lovely. So since you mentioned iNaturalist, Ashwin, there was another question from Nishant, who asked to know the differences between eBird, iNaturalist, and the Indian Biodiversity Portal.
Okay. So iNaturalist and Indian Biodiversity Portal are quite similar in that they're not checklist based. They are mostly photo based. You'll find that IBP, which is India Biodiversity Portal, has some checklists, but the intended information is in the form of photographs usually. Only then can they be verified. There's no backend system to be able to verify information that is not associated with photographs. So eBird that way is specifically meant for birds, because birds are really the only taxon where people maintain checklists and do not look at and do not depend on photos. If you look at any invertebrates or even snakes, frogs, etc., it's mostly photo-based identification, even butterflies, many of these organisms. Although for butterflies, you can think of a checklist-based system, but it's a little more complicated because identification is more difficult. Birds make sounds, which is very useful, and people over a really long time have developed ways to be able to identify birds without necessarily taking photographs. So birders make checklists. So when you have checklists, you need a slightly different system to get the best out of that information. You cannot have a system where, for example, on iNaturalist, if I put an observation without a photograph, there is no way for it to become research grade because it is community identified. You have people, other bird watchers. Let's say I put a photo of a bird. One of you can come in and look at that photo and try and verify it. So you look at it and say, okay, is this a black drongo? If yes, you agree with the identification. If two or more people agree with that identification, it becomes a research grade observation. Now, what happens if you put in something without a photograph? There is no way for anybody to know. So on eBird doesn't depend upon community identification at this level. There are inbuilt filters that for any area, you look at which birds are likely and which birds are unlikely. Those are that are extremely unlikely are kept at 0 in this filter, which means that if any report of that bird comes in, if somebody puts in a turtle dove from Bangalore, it immediately gets flagged so that some regional reviewers can look at that information and either confirm the observation or can write back to the observer saying, can you provide more information? Are there any notes, any comments that you can give? However, is there any way you uh, ruled out spotted dove? Were you able to separate it from spotted dove, which is the common dove here? And here this person has already uploaded a photograph, which is clearly of a turtle dove. So it can be confirmed quite easily. But if there's nothing provided, then generally there is some engagement between or some communication between reviewers and the birders. And that way, these observations are then brought into public output or made research grade in the same way as the iNaturalist observations. Anything that is not kept at 0 in a filter automatically goes into the public output. Right?
Okay.
It automatically is research grade. So this is the difference. So eBird is specifically meant for birds. iNaturalist is a photo-based platform meant for all taxa. So is IBP. And I think that both of these are amazing platforms and should be used, especially if for all other taxa. But if you're a birder who makes checklists, you can use eBird for your bird information and iNaturalist or IBP for everything else. And that's what I do. I use eBird for birds and the other platforms for everything else, including any cockroach or anything in my house. I just take photos of everything and put it on there. And yeah, so it's
Super. Yeah, thanks for that, Ashwin. Just before you move on to the next thing, I'll just take one more question, which is relevant, which is, should we mark what we hear versus what we see when we're putting up checklists?
not necessarily. That's actually a personal preference. Some people do it very meticulously. They put heard as a comment whenever they hear something. I don't do that because there's so much that you actually hear, you're often hearing everything, and then writing heard everywhere is probably not sustainable. But it's up to you. If you feel it's sustainable, go for it. You're welcome to do it. But there's no compulsion to do that because everything that you're detecting is what you're detecting. And that's the philosophy.
Super. Thanks.
Yes. So I'll just show one thing before we move on. Let me show you how to use maps, which are, I think, the best use of the eBird platform, really, for somebody who's trying to gain knowledge. For any species, so you see, if you go to the species page, you can click on the range map. So I'll open this in a new tab. But you can also, in Explore itself, you can go to species maps. So if you click on species maps, again, I'll open this in a new tab. So first, let me go to the blue throat map, which I went to using from the blue throat species page. And you can see that blue throat is actually found through a large part of the world, really, throughout Eurasia and also in parts of Alaska. But let me zoom into this area. This is Europe here and parts of Russia, etc. And here you have India. Now, is blue throat there year-round in India? Let's find out. We can look at where blue throats are in the breeding season alone. Let's see. Let's look at from May to, let's say, July. From May to July, where do we see blue throats? And you see that blue throats disappear from most of the country during that period. So you realize that blue throats are a winter migrant into most of peninsular India, whereas they breed in all of these areas. Whereas if you look at peak winter, let's look at December to Feb. Where are blue throats found? You see that blue throats are all found in the tropical parts of Eurasia. So you see there's that migratory movement that can be captured through observations uploaded by bird watchers. And through this, you can even make animated maps, etc. of migration and use it to understand so much about migration. And you can, if any of you want to look at it, you can go to the Bird Count India website and look at these migration maps that have been created completely using ebird data. And quickly, I'll go to the species maps here. Like the blue throat map, you can go to species maps and you can look for the map of any species. Let's look at the map of a species which is restricted, like let's say Kashmir flycatcher. So I'm putting a shortcut here. KAFL will give me Kashmir flycatcher. So that's something you can explore later. And here I go to Kashmir flycatcher. And what I see is there's just very few places where the bird is has been reported. I click on show points sooner, which will give me the points. So you see that this is the breeding area, this tiny part of Kashmir, and this is the wintering range. And all of these records are in passage, where the bird is moving down and going up. You can click on each one of these to look for more information. Is this correct? Somebody has reported a Kashmir flycatcher in some part of UP. Is it really a Kashmir flycatcher? Is it verifiable? So you can just verify these by clicking on them. Let me click on this one and see whether it's really a Kashmir flycatcher. So here we are. So this is the species, and this is the first winter Kashmir flycatcher. And you can verify it for yourself in case you are not confident about that observation. Right? So you can go around the map and click and see this. Okay, so now you can also look at only observations that have photographs. Okay. You see, all of these have photographs or audio. If you see this purple sign, it's audio, and also some with video. So then you can just go to those and click on them and look at it. Everything will open as a checklist, right? So here we have a video of a lovely male Kashmir flycatcher. See? So then you can look at it. People taking photos. Anyway, I won't spend time on this. And the last thing, there's the search, there's the media search tool. So search photos and sounds. So I won't spend time on this. You can click on it and look at what is possible here. But in this tool, you can look for photos and sounds using a search tab. Also, do explore this when you get time, because I think we're running a little late and I won't get into the details of all of these. Look around this website. There are so many things you can experience.
Super. And I think just now you answered another question which had come in about whether we can see other people's checklists. So it seems like the larger answer is yes, but is there any finer detail there?
You cannot, for example, you cannot go to somebody's profile and look at all the checklists they've uploaded. But if you go to a particular species map, or if you explore region, let's say I explore Bangalore, and I want to see who has uploaded checklists recently from Bangalore, I can look at the last 100 checklists from Bangalore. See? So these are all the recent visits. So if I want to look at Praveen Bennu's checklist from Bangalore, I can click on this date and I can look at this recent checklist from Bangalore. But remember that anybody can opt out of this feature. You can opt out of being showing up in the recent checklist, which is an important thing in terms of privacy. Not everybody wants their checklist to be seen by everybody else. So you can always opt out of it. So nobody will be able to see it when they explore a region like this, but they'll be able to see it on the map if you've reported a particular species. So, but there's a difference. People cannot track where you've been, but they can look at species distributions and go to your checklist from that if you've uploaded a record of a particular species. So,
right. Super.
Yeah. So I'll go back to the explore page and close these. Yeah. So have any other questions come in?
So the other questions are more to do with uploading checklists. So perhaps we can get into the submit tab maybe, and then we can take those as you talk about them.
So what I would, I'll instead, I don't recommend that people submit from the website
Okay.
unless there's a particular reason to, because it's far less intuitive than uh, uploading checklists from the app. So I don't know whether people will be able to see it if I show it like this.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to then? Difficult, right? Little hard,
Um,
little hard to tell.
a little bit, yes.
A little bit, but you see, so this is the app.
Yeah.
So it's useful to download the app if you want to upload bird checklists. Download the app, and in the app, it'll automatically, for example, take your GPS location. So you won't have to actually look for a place. Otherwise, you'll have to find it on a map. I'll have to zoom into my house on a world map, which is a little difficult to do it every time. So instead, if you use the app and keep your location on, it'll automatically take your location. And then it'll also allow you to choose nearby locations. For example, if you want to put it in something called a hotspot, eBird has the concept of a hotspot. Uh, if I don't want, for example, to make something directly from my house, I can choose a nearby hotspot and make it and put the checklist there. It'll also, for example, on the app directly take time. And as you're walking, it'll track your movements, which will only be visible to you and your shared birders. And it'll also, when you end the list, it'll take that duration from when did you start, when did you end. So the time period, the distance, everything is automatically calculated for you. But when you install the app, there are two things to remember. One thing is immediately after you install the app, install the India pack. There's an India pack which will give you all the filters for India, and that is something that will be recommended automatically when you install the app. But that is something you need to do. Also, change your preferences. Go to your preferences, change the language to English India. There's an English India specific language, which is English, but there are certain bird names that we've grown up using that are not what people use in other parts of the world. Many examples, including there's a what is Nagar and Babbler. Now, I think now the world name is also Nagar and Babbler, but previously it used to be called Longtail and Babbler, whereas we called it Nagar and Babbler. So there are these small differences on what names we use and what names the world uses. Also, gray, the color GREY is what we use in India, whereas in US they use GRAY. And if with GRAY, we get quite confused because none of us use that. So change your preferences to English India. There are certain other preferences also that you can choose. And there are actually many videos on how to install the app and what preferences to check, etc. on the Bird Count India YouTube channel. You can always go there and look and use those resources to help you with this.
Super. Ashwin, if you'd like, you can stop sharing your screen and we can just take a few questions as they're coming,
Yeah.
unless there's something else you'd like to show on the website. Okay, yeah. So now that we're talking about checklists, one person has asked, is there an ideal minimum amount of time that we should give or wait for noticing birds before making our checklist?
You mean before you start the checklist or during the checklist? So let me answer both. Before you start the checklist, none at all. You can just start your checklist. For example, now if I want to do a checklist, I just step outside the house, even if it's dark. That really doesn't matter. I step outside the house and I just remain focused for some small period of time. Let's say for the next 5-10 minutes or however long I want to listen. Usually in the night, if I want to make a checklist, I just sit outside for half an hour. I might be doing something else, but I keep my ears open. It's all about hearing in the night. So if my local spotted owlets or barn owl or something, one of them is calling or moving around, I enter that in the checklist. And that's about it. So you can anything from during the day, 5 minutes. 5 minutes is also fine. Generally, 15 minutes is what is recommended. 15 minutes minimum, because it gives a good amount of time for you to even be able to say identify birds, take time to do certain other things, and get a good idea what's there in that spot. So 15 minutes is a good amount of time, but you can even make 5-minute checklists. There are times in Europe where I've made even 3-minute checklists because nothing changes. There are about 3 birds there in the winter, and the same 3 birds will be sitting in front of you. So there's
Right.
no point really going on for too long. So I make 3-minute checklists sometimes.
So I'll
3
just
minutes
ask
is
a quick,
minimum.
okay, minimum, right? So I'll ask a quick follow up. So when you put in a checklist, you have the option of calling it an incidental versus a complete checklist. So can you talk about that differentiation? So what is an incidental checklist?
Thanks for that question. Yeah. So incidental is one of 4 or 5 regular protocols that you can use while making a checklist. If you're creating a checklist on the app, it will give you these options. Incidental, traveling, stationary, and historical are the 4 options you'll see immediately. Now, the difference between incidental and the other 3 is that an incidental checklist, you make it when your primary purpose is not watching birds. Now, let's say I'm now part of this discussion and I'm focused on this, but I hear a barn owl calling outside the house now, and I want to report it. Then what do? After we finish the discussion, I just note down the time. It's 6:53, and I go back and make a checklist for 6:53, an incidental checklist for 6:53, which is automatically going to be incomplete. There's going to be an option that something you're asked: are you reporting all birds that you saw or heard during this period? And the answer is no. It's only the barn owl because I haven't been paying attention at all. And so I put that barn owl, I make it incidental, I click on no for are you reporting all species? So which makes it an incomplete checklist, and I click on submit, which then uploads that information. This is also what you might do while driving. Let's say I'm driving fast and I have some interesting bird sitting by the side of the road, but I can't stop, and actually I'm not birding, I'm focusing on the road and focusing on other vehicles maybe going at 50, 60. So I just quickly note down the GPS point by clicking on start and clicking stop right then. Or I ask somebody sitting next to me to do that, and then he put in that bird as an incidental and then move on. So an incidental is literally an incidental. It wasn't what you wanted to do, but all the others are when you are actually birding. And there you can still have complete or incomplete. When your primary purpose is birding, you can choose the protocol of stationary, traveling, stationary or traveling. And if you are noting down everything that you're seeing or hearing, then you mark yes for are you submitting a complete checklist of birds. You click on no if you're only noting down certain species. For example, sometimes we go birding, but let's say there are some other distractions. You have other co-birders, you're also talking a little bit. Your primary purpose is birding, but you're not focused enough to note down a complete checklist. In
Right.
which case, what you would do is you upload it as an incomplete checklist, and you just put those two or three important species that you've noticed. Then historical is when you're retrospectively uploading a checklist, but retrospectively is not yesterday or day before. I might still remember all the details. This is something for which historical checklist is for something where you don't remember the distance traveled, or you don't remember the time spent birding, you don't remember these important metadata, that's associated with the checklist. So let's say I want to make a checklist for sometime 15 years back when I was birding in a place. I have it noted down in a notebook, but I have no idea about time and distance. So then I note it down as a historical checklist, and then I click on submit. But this I noted down as a complete historical checklist, not incomplete, because I know that it's a complete list of birds that have been noted for that period of time and that day. But these details are unknown, but I know that it's a complete list. So historical can be complete or incomplete. So can stationary or traveling, but incidental can only be incomplete.
Right. Perfect. That was really nice and detailed. So I'll just ask you a couple of very quick questions before maybe we talk about the other apps, which is where was that one? Yeah. So when you're birding in a new location and there isn't a clear hotspot nearby, what's the protocol then? Do you create a new location or do you pick the closest one regardless?
It's always good to be as precise as possible, because that's vital in understanding both distributions and associations with habitat. Many scientific possibilities hinge on the precision of this bird information. So I suggest that you make it make the location as precise as possible. If there is no hotspot, then you can create a personal location for that point, and you can always suggest it as a hotspot. A hotspot is something that is of public interest. So if you feel that location is going to be of public interest, then you can go back to your locations on the website, and you can suggest that location as a hotspot after you upload the checklist. But yeah, if not, you can always make it a personal location. For example, my house is a personal location. It's not of public interest. It's of interest to me. So it's a personal location.
Right. Perfect. And the last one is for somebody who doesn't add a checklist every day, and perhaps they'll want to just put a checklist once in a blue moon. Is it still beneficial to use eBird, and does it help to put a checklist like that?
Certainly, certainly. Every checklist that's uploaded is of scientific value. And a number of eBird users actually make checklists only once a week or once a month. It's all okay. There is no real recommendation here. It just depends upon how often you're birding. So you're welcome to use the platform even if you make one checklist a year, or you made only one checklist your whole life. It's just about it just, as I said, two reasons. One is it tells you what checklist you've made. It gives you an online notebook of sorts, and even that one checklist is of scientific value. So for both reasons.
Super. Thanks, Ashwin. That's mostly all the questions about checklists on the eBird app. Perhaps now you can tell us just briefly about Merlin and BirdNet before we close, which I think the three of these apps put together form just an incredible resource packet for anyone starting out. So could you tell us just a little bit about what Merlin and BirdNet do? And of course, we'd encourage everyone here who's interested in recording and birding and learning more to have these apps on your phones. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that far more important than eBird, if you want to learn about birds, if you want to learn about bird distributions and anything about birds really, Merlin is the app to download. So Merlin itself is based on eBird data that people have uploaded over all these years. It's a carefully curated app that has photos, it has audio for all of these birds, it has a description, and it also has the ability to identify birds from photographs. Again, there's this photo ID feature, which of course is not 100% dependable because nothing really is, but there is some indication that it gives you in which direction to go. Let's say you're just starting off birding, you have a camera and you've taken a photo of a bird and you want to be sent in the right direction. You can upload this photograph to Merlin, and Merlin will give you an idea of what this bird might be, a few options of what it might be. But the best feature in Merlin, according to me, is something called likely birds. You can if you've downloaded the app and there's an India pack, you can download the India pack, and then you'll see an option in the top right. You can look at this recording later for this information, I suppose. You look at the top right and you'll have two options. There'll be one thing that says bird packs and there'll be one thing that says likely birds. And this option of likely birds is, I think, extremely useful for somebody going to a new area, because what it does is it looks at all eBird data uploaded for a particular area for a particular period of time, and you can set those specifications. When you click on likely birds, you can set an area, you can set a time. It looks at all the eBird data uploaded and it gives you the most likely birds you're going to see, or the birds you're most likely to see in that area for that period of time. So let's say I'm going to Hyderabad, and I don't really know what birds are expected in Hyderabad. What should I look out for? What should I brush up on how to identify maybe from a field guide? You can click on likely birds, put Hyderabad, put January 20th is the date, and then you're going to get the most likely bird followed by the second most likely bird, etc., given in descending order. And I think this is a really useful feature for somebody who's experiencing an area for the first time, or the birds of an area for the first time. So I suggest you use that. So Merlin, I think, is a must download really. Even if you're not ready to start making bird checklists on eBird, download Merlin and explore, and there's just so much to learn. Merlin is also coming out with a sound ID feature for India soon. There's already sound ID for US, but the sound ID for India that will be coming out in the next year or so, which I think is going to be really, really beneficial for many of us. And at the moment, there's an app called BirdNet that already exists where you can real time in field, you can, let's say something is singing, a magpie robin is singing, you can have the app open and record that sound in the app. And if you have internet, it will try and direct you to what that sound, which bird might have made that sound. So you can try BirdNet also out. It's very simple and intuitive. But again, this aspect is still growing in India. Sound ID and just interest in sounds. And hopefully, in the next year or two, there'll be enough information to be able to do this also to the same degree of precision that photo ID is able to do, for example. So yeah. I would also say that a very important part of a naturalist toolkit or a birder's toolkit is either iNaturalist or IBP, the apps, and they're really so wonderful. And I think the power of all of us observing our natural surroundings, I think is really immense. And there's even with iNaturalist, there's so much we're learning about the most common animals around us. I suggest you try those out as well. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Ashwin. And I think this is so much, so relevant even now when we are dealing with curfews and lockdowns and confined to our homes, where, I think a lot of us are noticing even urban biodiversity a lot more now than we ever did before. And definitely these apps are a super place to learn more and contribute. So just thank you so much. I think we managed to cover a lot of ground even though time was limited, and I think this is a great place to begin. And I think we've done justice to most of the questions that have come in. So thanks so much for doing this and for taking all of the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, it was a real pleasure to be here, and I wish, I mean, one day we should have maybe a physical interaction where we can actually interact. But
Definitely. That would be great. And
yeah,
you're a lot of fun to bird with. So we should see if we can do that sometime.
yes,
Thanks everyone for joining us as
thank
well,
you.
and for being so interactive and asking so many questions. This was really great. And we'll see you soon with more webinars. Thanks again, Ashwin.
Bye all.
Bye.